Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Before we hear from our speaker, our tradition is to go around and introduce ourselves first. Before we do that, just by a show of hands, is there anyone returning after a long absence or visiting for the first time? Great. We will try and remember your names as we go around so we can make you feel welcome afterwards in our social period. My name is Tom. I'm Kay.
I'm Tony.
I am Antonio.
My name is Gary.
Hara.
Danny.
I'm Jason.
Omar.
I'm Chris.
I'm Lee.
Tom. My name is Jerry.
I'm Richard.
Juan.
Larry. I'm Shay.
Dennis.
Peter.
I'm Brad. My name is Cass. I'm Jack.
My name is Dal. I'm Sam.
Alicia. Michael.
And
Chris.
my name is Joe.
My name is Harley.
Ethan.
Michael.
My name is Robert.
I'm Tommy. Greg.
Isabel.
Ryan.
Vin.
Bob.
Did we miss anyone? Great. So our speaker today is Joe Rodriguez. Joe is a Soto Zen student from the Shunryu Suzuki lineage, studying under Furyu Nancy Schroeder, the abiding abbess of Green Gulch Farm Zen Center. And he's serving as a board member of the San Francisco Zen Center. As a business executive and a longtime LGBT activist, his practice is to bring awareness, compassion, and forgiveness to daily life. His topic will be healing our velvet rage through self-awareness and loving kindness. Joe, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me here today on this cold July morning. It seems to be an annual tradition. I don't know why I always speak in July or August, but I accept the challenge. Healing our velvet rage is my topic today, and I've developed this talk. In fact, I just got done writing it last night. Based on what I know, my life as a gay man. My observations may not apply to the L, the B, or the T, or to every gay man. But here goes. I haven't had a chance to memorize this, so here it goes. Last November, I received an urgent call from the wife of a favorite cousin of mine. One of their twin boys, Isaac, had just come out to them. And despite the fact that his parents had unconditionally accepted him, he was having serious emotional problems. Sarah, his mom, was afraid of leaving him alone because he might harm himself. I called to see how I could help, and after talking to his anxious mom, I did suggest they find Isaac a supportive therapist immediately, and that's what they did. But then Isaac and I started a series of phone calls, text, and email messages where he talked frankly about his concerns about being gay. This dialogue went on for many months, and as we worked through both his fears and his dreams, he was reassured to know that he could have a good life as a gay man. But buried underneath his words and feelings, there was something raw and sharp, painfully familiar to me even after all the years since I came out. I detected a razor-like shard of shame, guilt about his same-sex crushes and nascent sexual desires. I was surprised that here in 2016, my beloved cousin was experiencing some of the same difficult feelings that I had gone through 35 years ago. Despite our progress, countless pride parades, many episodes of Modern Family, millions of people coming out, marriage equality across the U.S., Isaac was feeling the same emotions that I faced as an adolescent. How could this be? So I've been thinking a lot about homophobia and reading a lot about it. And all roads lead to one conclusion. Our society suffers from institutionalized sexism. For eons, the rules of this society have been set by powerful straight men, primarily for their benefit. Think about it. Presidents, judges, doctors, businessmen, military leaders, coaches, principals were mostly men up until recently. As a British professor, Eric Anderson writes, at the heart of the traditional straight man's world, women are seen as low-status sexual objects to be conquered. With their fear of femininity and nervousness about sustaining heterosexuality, traditional straight men have set our norms. For example, while it's acceptable and common for girls to be very intimate with their fellow females, males have traditionally been taught to avoid any type of physical or emotional intimacy with one another, except for competitive sports, which have been seen as a training ground for the military. And if a boy like Isaac breaks this long taboo, he is called a girl, a fag, or a wimp, and risks being rejected by other males. In short, boys have been taught femininity equals weakness, and being a gay male equals weakness. Sexism damages the LGBT as well as women and straight men. And we can see from Donald Trump and straight men like him that don't want to give up their male privileges. This is about power. And while these gender attitudes have been changing since the 1960s, we have a long ways to go to reverse 5,000 years of human history. In November, this terrible dilemma tormenting my cousin came down to this. By being true to his authentic feelings, he may lose much. His friends, his church, the fellowship of straight boys, his safety, and even his privileges as a straight man. Of course, this choice was even stark for 20 to 50 years ago when most of us made the same decision. Maybe the most pernicious effect of homophobia is internalized rage and shame, which psychologist Alan Downs discusses in a book, The Velvet Rage, published in 2005. While this is not the best written book that I've read, it contains many ideas. How many people have heard of this book? Wow, that's more than I thought. Great. Let me read you a passage to convey one of the basic tenets of the book. Quote, even though we may not have been suicidal, most gay men start at a place of being overwhelmed with the shame of being gay in a world that worships traditional masculine power. Thus begins the first stage in a gay man's life, and it is the stage that is characterized by being overwhelmed by shame. This is the start of our journey as gay men, and it is by far the most difficult and damaging. Some pretty chilling words. The sad fact that is, many gay men tend to turn this homophobia on themselves, just like we did, making it our fault that they're coming of age in an intolerant straight world. I could see this in my cousin and listening to his fears, and including the harmful messages he has internalized about women, sexual orientation, and what sexual behavior is considered to be normal and natural. Even good Buddhists like men like the Dalai Lama have reinforced negative notions about gay men and homosexuality, famously saying in 1997 that sexually using one's hands, mouth, or the other hole are inappropriate and they amount to sexual misconduct. While he has softened his comments since then, they were a painful reminder about the pervasiveness of ignorance about the LGBT and homosexuality. Shame stigmatizes who we are, including our deepest yearnings for closeness and love. Shame obstructs what Buddhists call our inherent basic goodness or Buddha nature. Shame is the opposite of what we've learned from Harry Hay, Harvey Milk, and 99% of animal biologists, that our sexual orientation is commonplace and natural. It is our birthright. But before I talk any further, I want to pause and briefly hear your comments or thoughts and see if anything's coming up as I'm talking about this.
Right on.
I have something. Something that came up to me is that I was just like thinking that yesterday I was hanging out with these friends of mine who were Brazilian and Turkish, and it reminded me about like how different the touching and the affection, like what you expressed, it's very true, I think, for like certain cultural groups that dominate in the United States. It's not true for me, like in my cultural group.
Sure.
And I feel that like when I was in Turkey, I was just amazed at like how much straight men touched me all the time. I was constantly being touched by strangers who were strangers to me. And I would see straight men touching each other in ways that to me looked like they were lovers, like everywhere.
Yeah.
And I just think it's like kind of interesting because it's very true. Like in the U.S., I was listening about my brother when he came from Peru he moved here to live with us, and how he was kind of a little ostracized by my American-born brothers because he was constantly like hanging all over us and touching. And I liked it. He would always hold my hand everywhere, and it was just I don't know. I just thought it was just kind of interesting, like how it varies by culture.
Yeah, I can definitely can see that. And one of the things that's interesting in places like Turkey or other places that were awareness of homosexuality is increased in gay people, sometimes in those cultures, once there's sort of a understanding of there's gayness out there and it's a formalized thing, people start touching less. People become a little more restrictive because they don't want to be perceived as gay. And I think one of the things, really, when I was trying to get through this sort of like theoretical part of what I was going to talk about today, because I actually, I was thinking, why is my cousin feeling this way? I mean, like, it's 2016. And what I realize is men have so much power in society. And on some level, he knew by coming out, he'd be giving up some of that. And not in a way like he's a power maniac, but just in the way that he would be respected less, like women have been.
Plus, I work with high school kids, and I see the struggles the LGBTQ kids go through. And I think that even kids who are from progressive families, or even who live in the bubble of San Francisco, the messages out there that are coming at them, like the Republican platform,
Right.
which is rabidly homophobic, that they absorb these things. And it still isn't there where kids can express their homosexuality and date and have a normal life. Even in progressive places, it's still awkward and hard for that to happen, that a lot of kids don't necessarily have that natural development where you get a crush on someone, you go on dates, blah, 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 where often it's a waiting until after they graduate from high school and then they can, explore their sexuality.
Makes total sense. I'm not surprised by that. Yes.
So I was intrigued by what you were presenting, and I think you started it off in a good way by saying that it might not apply to, in fact, lesbians and some of the other groups, but I think it's lesbians in particular, because it seems to me, I was thinking, where does this come from? And I think you did put your finger on the central point. It's in a sense not about homosexuality. It's about the role of women and men in the society. And what's intriguing is why has homosexuality been identified with the what has historically been the lower status role for other evolutionary reasons, no doubt, of women. And what occurs to me also is that in some segments, from what I've read, it's only identified with it if you're a bottom.
Yeah,
And
that's
you
right.
don't have children.
Yeah.
So those are things about it. And then what happens, it acquires a cultural penumbra about emotionalism and a bunch of other things. But that's really the core of the issue. And I would suggest that, speculatively, it's in the process of changing.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to where does that come from, it comes from the role of men as bringing home the bacon and killing off the enemy.
Right.
That they were the more important, typically, producers, as well as producers of children. But that's changing in our society. So if you look at the data now, there are now more women in college. Women do better in most of the general tests and so forth. And hey, soon we may want to be identified as homosexual rather than straight men.
We'll see. But it is. I think it's a good point. We may even have a woman president. You never know. But I think one of the things that's happened to me is as I've matured as a person and a man and a gay person, is like I really come to see women are my natural allies, and I am proud to say that I'm a feminist because we share the same sort of, we're fighting the same sort of beliefs about being, whether it's being a bottom or being less than in some ways. And even today, I like in certain business settings where I know the men are of a certain age, and they know that I'm gay, I feel like there's a certain discount they have towards me. And it's a subtle thing, but I can feel it. And I could talk about the Warriors and sports and politics, which I all like, but there's just I'm just not part of the club. There's a little bit of a nervousness. But anyway, before I want to, there's a couple, yes, please.
So it strikes me, just thinking about that further, about the Trump phenomenon. So what it seems to me that underlies that is straight white males becoming enraged about race,
Exactly.
about their status reduction.
No one gives up power without a struggle. All right. I wanted to do this talk today about being gay and spiritual in a straight man's world, really to better understand my own feelings and experiences. If you do think you have some shame about your sexuality, take the simple test. Imagine how would you feel if you were watching a movie with a heterosexual member of your family, say your mother, your brother, or your niece, and there was a big gay sex scene. What would that be like for you? In contrast, most of us have watched many straight love scenes with our family members. As human beings facing adversity, we learn to cope. We find ways to lessen the feelings of shame. As the writer of the Velvet Rage writes, very soon a gay man discovers that shame is manageable if he learns to avoid the cues in his world that trigger the intolerable feelings. In no time, he is avoiding all the manner of situations, people, and feelings that triggers his sense of shame. Some of the most destructive coping strategies for dealing with shame that Downs writes about in his book include avoidance, including suicide, denial of our sexuality and identity, like deeply closeted people, substance abuse, and years of only anonymous sexual encounters. Any of that sound familiar? But there are also less destructive coping strategies that I have observed or used in my own life, including, I got a good list here, the need to be perfect at everything, the perfect career, the perfect home, the perfect body, car, kids, just like the author of The Best Little Boy in the World writes about. The need to be in control of everything, including others. Short and stormy romantic relationships. Working all the time. Being highly critical of oneself and others. Having crushes on unavailable men. gossiping and triangulating, ignoring the emotional pain when others hurt you, being obsessed with material things and external beauty. And last but not least, something I've done a lot in my life is accommodating or placating others at the expense of oneself. Importantly, as one of my friends wisely pointed out to me, some of these coping mechanisms may have actually saved our lives when we were young, but may no longer serve us as middle-aged men. Not all of you are middle-aged. These coping mechanisms often get in the way of all sorts of intimacy. They distance us from our authentic feelings, which is our greatest treasure. Let me repeat that. Our authentic feelings are our greatest treasure. Given the homophobic norms that have kept us from being all of ourselves, feelings of rage often emerge. Rage is the natural emotional outcome of living in a straight world and being placed in impossible situations. For example, coming out but losing your faith community or church, hiding your natural affection for your partner when visiting that homophobic relative or country. The velvet rage, as Down describes, is the experience of intense anger that results when gay men feel ashamed about their sexuality and relationships. This contrasts with the steady stream of affirmation that straight boys and men get about their sexuality. And often, the velvet rage can be triggered by things unrelated to our sexual identity. I'll give you 2 examples from my own personal life. I was coming back from Europe, and I was flying through Asia, and I needed to catch a flight to get to San Francisco. And after this 14-hour flight, they had bumped me off my flight, and I just totally had a meltdown at the United business counter. I was like flying about 200,000 miles a year, and I just couldn't believe they bumped me off. Or like the time in my 30s, some of my friends will remember this story, when I caught my boyfriend cheating on me at the end of the birthday party that I gave for him. And then I went home and dumped all his things into the snow. Yeah, there was a little bit of rage. Not surprising, my rage tends to surface when I feel powerless, invalidated, or not respected. That's how I felt when I realized I was gay in 1981. And that's how I felt when I heard about the news in Orlando, thinking about all those young people who were slaughtered. It still hurts. Like the survivors of a long siege, we endure these terrible acts while knowing that we shall eventually win the war for equality. And these hurts add up, and they can lead to a deadening of our feelings or an explosion of rage. So before I go much further, I want to hear about some of your coping mechanisms that you used in this sometimes hostile world. And what has been your experience with rage?
Hey, Joe. Well, I mean, not a direct answer to that, but you indicated that this rage arises in response to feeling powerless, invalidated, and not respected. And it occurs to me that that's true for everyone.
Yeah.
We're seeing the backlash of white privilege being slowly chipped away at. But I see it with homeless people too.
Oh, totally.
When you see someone on the street who just goes wild and acts out and they're shouting at people, it's because of the same thing. So I think it's a human response. We just may be more, the groups that you're talking about, women and gay men and all that, we probably experience it more often.
Yeah.
So we're more attuned to it, I think.
And then so we do develop these coping mechanisms that you want to hear about.
Yeah, well, and it's not even so. I'm really willing to talk about anything, but I think one of the things that happens in this is up until about 30 years ago, gay people would be angry about things, but it was societally not acceptable to express it. So that doubles the anger, and and I think women have been feeling the same things. They couldn't say when the boss asked them to make coffee for the group how they felt about it. So that, and people that are African American and see one sentence for a white Stanford student and another sentence for a guy at Vanderbilt, a black, that one's 6 months and one's 15 months, that causes rage. So, But I think one of the things about this book that I found really interesting was, and really this point, coping mechanisms are natural to have, and they actually make sense at certain times in your life. But for example, I think I used to use appeasing or accommodating difficult people as a way of surviving. And I had a number of difficult boyfriends, and I realized this isn't a really good strategy for me anymore. I really need to speak up. Yes.
In the family I grew up in, it was almost as shameful a thing to express a rage as it was to be gay.
Yeah.
So I have been noticing as I am using the Dharma to heal myself that I am now grateful for the support of people like Jack Kornfield and Pema Chodron and Ajahn Chah to say things to myself, sometimes on the spot and sometimes in my meditation. Sometimes for 30 minutes I've had to say to myself, outrageous rage, and breathe that in, and then breathe out some form of letting go. Mainly saying things like, as it is, just as it is. And at the end of 30 minutes, I discover that I am able to look at how much of my life I have changed the rage into resentment. And my really big one is withholding blessing from people who are doing better than I am. It's all related to this not being able to really be authentically angry.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I have a weekly men's meditation group, and one of the things is we sometimes come in and tell each other our weekly stories of rage a little bit, and it just comes up in conversation about what happened in uni or something like that. And I think the thing is, if you really become a rageaholic or expressing a rage and have a meltdown at United all the time, people think you're crazy, you lose your friends. It's not a cool thing. But the feeling that comes up, knowing what's going on in your own system, you might hit the pause button, but feeling that and noticing, I'm really angry. Why is that the case? And just accepting it, just watching that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, I'd just like to say that it's really puzzling that you would think, we're making progress in society, and there's gay marriage, and there's this and there's that. And whenever something like this happens, it seems like there's something happening that contradicts it. And the more you move into one direction, there's going to be a counter-reaction. And I think that's all being played out in society in extremely destructive ways. And the other thing is just, for myself to just take stock and take a look inside and see what all is going on with me. How do I relate to all this? And if I have the rage can sometimes be very justified, but you don't want, obviously, I think, to me, obviously enough, you don't want to allow it to run rampant.
That's right.
So I think these contradictions that we see outside of ourselves, they're also maybe to a degree inside of ourselves. We can find them there too.
Absolutely, and that's where I'm going in my talk, and I really appreciate that.
Somewhat to relate to that, though it's an odd use of the term, I would suggest that other coping mechanisms are depression and suicide. And the distinction is between people who feel like they're being treated like shit and they deserve it.
That's right.
So you get depression and suicide, and people who feel like they're being treated like shit and this is wrong. And if you go back in the history of the recent gay movement in the U.S., most of which I've lived through, so the early part of it was focused on consciousness raising and pride. And it was only later that the sort of more feelings of anger and political and social change came up. So you had to come to believe that, this really is unfair and wrong before you could then go on to say we need to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that if you think about it, pride is the opposite of shame.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to have that initial thing. There was one other person over here. Yes.
Thank you for your talk, and a lot is coming up. And I'm just getting home from a month of travel. I was in New York, and I was helping a friend whose husband died suddenly of a heart attack. And I just want to acknowledge, yes, we are making progress, because I was in this very small town of Poughkeepsie, New York, and my friend and his husband lived there, and his church and his community really came to his rescue when his partner died. But I feel like that's because he and his partner had a daughter they adopted. They lived in a house. They had 2 cars. One was a city council member. Like, they had that hetero structure around them. And I wondered, as I was riding into Manhattan, I saw this young queen come prancing and voguing onto the train. I thought, I wonder what would happen if he walked into church. Would he get the same loving embrace? I don't know. And then the idea of the coping skill, I feel like I'm a lot less ragey now because of Buddhism and meditation and 12-step recovery and things. But you made me flash back to my 20s in Washington, D.C., and my coping mechanism was to look like an angry motherfucker. And I had all black, leather jacket, and I just walked around like, don't mess with me. And I remember times walking down the street by my house, and I'd see someone that looked threatening. And as they approached, in my mind, I started doing a slideshow of all the times I'd been teased, all the times I'd heard homophobic comments, all the times that people were threatened me, and I get into this rage spiral. And I was actually clenching my fists, and my heart was pounding. I was ready to beat the hell out of the person that was approaching me, and not knowing anything about them, except they looked threatening. And sometimes they'd be like, "Hey,
that's right. That's beautifully said.
When I get a taste of rage, all the past rage kind of comes rushing back to enhance the rage.
One of the things I think is so great about what you said is being able to smile at that and sort of understand that. And I think society has been so hard on gay people and a lot of different groups. But we're talking about gay people today, or LGBT, and for us to have coping mechanisms, I don't want to add to the injury there. We just acknowledge it, and that happened, and it got me through this, and I'm an adult now, and I can maybe change, and maybe this, I'm a little, do I need to really iron my boxer shorts? Maybe that might just be too much control. But anyway, someone you mentioned upstate New York, that's where we're going next. So here we go. For me, the point of this talk today is to mindfully look at our emotional experiences and explore how we can be freer, to realize more of our Buddha nature, to have more access to our deepest thoughts and feelings, and to be more interconnected with others. Besides doing a fair amount of therapy in my life, there are 3 things that I have done to address my rage and shame. Number 1, being still and quiet. I've always had a tendency to fill up my schedule, maxing out my life. But at the same time, Sometimes I've used that to push difficult feelings away. About 20 years ago, I did a 3-week silent meditation retreat for the first time. And I realized at the end of that how much I was suppressing. I try to meditate 4 to 5 times a week, but not always. To drive sometimes with the radio off, to be or hike in nature, to stand in line without checking my iPhone twice, to be present, noticing my feelings and physical sensations. The second strategy I've used is to be aware when I am pleasing or placating others at the expense of myself. Like many gay men, I was raised by a mom to placate a difficult husband in situations, and unconsciously adopted this as a coping strategy after I came out. So in my everyday life, I keep on asking myself, do I really want to be doing this? Is this the behavior that really an expression of my heart's desire? Or am I running on automatic pilot again? Third strategy, reparenting myself and helping young people. One of the things that I've been doing over the last 5 to 10 years has been getting in touch with my inner teenage self, honoring that wonderful and scared kid. This has been sometimes painful, but it has made me emotionally lighter, less needy, more flexible, and open to life. And one of the ways I've reparented myself has been mentoring young gay men, like Jason, the 25-year-old man that I helped raise, and more recently, my cousin, which brings me back to where I started this talk. Since last November, Isaac and I have exchanged a steady stream of messages, including suggested books, articles, movies, which I've tried to convey a big gay world of possibility for him. To be out at work, to marry, to have a family, to live openly and proudly in the world. Week by week, he's gotten emotionally stronger and more resilient. And most importantly, he's trusting his deepest feelings again. Accordingly, in February, Cupid struck, with him meeting another boy in his high school, a thespian named Billy. They've been dating just like any other high school couple, spending a lot of time together, holding hands, walking each other to class, pledging their love to each other on Facebook and Instagram. It's been touchy. I mean, the hashtags, first love, love forever, I mean, it's amazing. Isaac has even become president of his high school gay-straight alliance. But being an openly gay man still has its challenges. About 2 weeks ago, my cousin and his boyfriend were confronted by a 40-year-old bully on the main street of their small town as they held hands. The perpetrator shouted anti-gay slurs and then pushed and threatened them and eventually chased them. But my increasingly proud cousin was not having any of it. Despite being scared, he memorized the perpetrator's license plate number and ran to the police station and demanded that they find and charge this bully. This man was arrested for aggravated assault as a hate crime, which is a felony. The trial will take place this fall, requiring Isaac to take the witness stand. I want to wrap up this talk by being hopeful. And I believe things are getting better for Isaac and for all of us, especially as we question sexism and destroy the old pillars of homophobia. 2, as we find time to quiet our minds and trust our feelings again. And 3, as we have the courage to demand equality for ourselves and for other people, including Black people, women, the homeless, and others who are disadvantaged. I want to end this with a Facebook message that Isaac sent to me last Wednesday after his assault story ran in the newspaper. Joey, my name, thank you for your wonderful support and heartwarming encouragement. This has been a pivotal year for me. I'm taking a stand for myself, hoping to inspire others in the process. I've been through a lot, and I've learned a lot, and I love you. You can see the emoticons. So, step by step, breath by breath, we are changing this world for the better and healing our velvet rage in the process. Thank you. Do we have time for a comment?
Yeah, we have about 8 minutes.
It's really, this, my cousin lives in Cooperstown, New York, and it's a small town in the Hudson Valley where the Baseball Hall of Fame is, and it's about 10,000 people. So it's a great little microcosm of America, and it's just amazing. You were talking about Poughkeepsie and just further north there, how things are actually changing. The small town newspaper came out with an editorial saying that they were proud of the police prosecuting this as a hate crime, the first one they've ever prosecuted, and in this small town. And I just thought one bit of progress on this. I was thinking, I've been sort of bullied like my cousin was, but I never turned it into a felony or a hate crime. So there is progress.
Hey, I have something interesting. I heard last night on NPR this story of a woman in Afghanistan who, in their culture, women are treated like completely inferior.
Right.
I mean, they're basically like servants, so that the boys can go out and play and go to school and everything else. And it wasn't until she saw a postcard of these two kids, I think here in the U.S., playing on the beach together, a boy and a girl, in their bathing suits, in the water, touching each other, playing, that she realized that this was not universal.
That's right.
That her role was not set in concrete, it was just within the boundaries of her society. And she was able to get out and, see asylum and everything. But it's so interesting that our culture can look, if the gap is big enough, we can look at Afghanistan and say, oh, no, that's not right. But when the gap is smaller and, like you're talking about, we can't see it as well. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that about, maybe ways that highlighting the differences can be helpful versus causing more harm. I think it's visibility. It's a matter of visibility.
It is. I think, it's my business partner is a woman, and she was one of the first women to graduate at Williams College, which used to be an L college. And almost every day when we're out there in the business world, sometimes it's funny because I'm a man. About 65% of the time, people look at me instead of her, even though she's the smarter one, and I'm not even being. She's got a lot of brilliant ideas, and it's amazing. I'm like, that's a little thing. That's just a little difference. And she notices for me, like, people ask me, what did I do this weekend? And I mentioned I went to Gay Pride. We were in a business meeting, and how people just changed the conversation. And, and I think in terms of, like, it is amazing to, like, my cousin, Isaac, he's got a twin brother who's straight, and they're fraternal or identical twins. But I think they're going to come out to the West Coast because they need to see gay people really integrated into society. My brother, is 5 years younger than me. He happens to be gay too. So my cousin has had a lot of resources. He's got two openly gay cousins who are pretty happy and out there and, in the world. So having that possibility, but I do think, it's important to stand up for things that are injustices related to our community, but it's also important to stand up for injustices related to other communities, because we're all in this together. And this issue around, and I don't want to demonize traditionally straight white men. This costs them a lot too. To emotionally not express yourself leads to a lot of things. There's a lot of dissatisfied women out there who husbands can't express their emotions, dump them, and they tend to use substances and other things. So we're all in this together. We're really all in this together. Yes.
Do you have any tips or things that have worked for trying to build connections with those same straight white males that do kind of marginalize in the workplace? That I deal with that not a lot, but
yeah, sometimes
I work in a very professional environment. Everyone I work with is straight male, married with kids, and I find myself kind of I distance myself a little bit. Right. I don't talk my personal life a lot, and so I just wonder if there's any things that you've learned to try to maintain a connection with them in spite of this kind of.
Well, it depends on who they are, but I think there's two things that people pick up on. One, if you're proud of yourself and what you're doing, I would just start sharing more, even if it might turn on deaf ears a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a little hard. And then I think finding ways to make bridges. Like, I happen to be a big Golden State Warriors fan, and I can actually talk about that because I really am passionate about that team. But then I bring in Jaron Collins, one of the coaches on the Warriors. His brother just came out, so I weave my little gay web in there. Because I want to push people, and people want to be pushed in a way. I mean, I think one of the things about us as human beings is we want to feel interconnected. Now, having the other is causes a lot of heartache. So, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up such an important topic and stuff that is part of our lives. I'm just wondering, so much of our development, our experience, and our history with rage and being attacked and being put down and that whole power thing is just so much in our lives. But what I'm wondering is how you respond to even your cousin. That through history, people have been abused, we've been abused, and our anger, for example, Stonewall or ACT UP, all this was very important to make changes and to make political responses. But to me, it's also important to explore how we respond, and that's where the Buddhist practice comes in, because rage and anger is great at certain times, but after a while it only hurts us, it doesn't hurt the persons that are. So on how you would maybe counsel your cousin or even us when we have this rage not to be consumed by it, because it's just eating ourselves up, and use Buddhist practice and Buddhist teachings to turn that into acceptance of certain things, but going on to heal our own hearts so we aren't consumed with rage.
Yeah.
Response always, but to turn it into stuff that we try to learn here.
Oh, well said. I think as soon as I heard about all this whole incident with my cousin, I sent him an email saying, not every situation calls for the same response. If someone had a gun or someone was trying to mow you over or whatever, you get the hell out of there. And I think also in situations that brings up our rage, this is not about hey, we should be rageful. We should just be mindful when we're feeling rageful. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I try to do, not always successfully, is hit this pause button. Do I just want to lash out and create more craziness? Or or can I take a breath? What's my part of this? And how can I de-escalate things? And My friend Michael and I, we had a situation like this week where I could have turned what was becoming a bad situation into a really rageful and hateful situation. And 20 years ago, I could have been right, tried to be right rather than be happy. So I just damped it down.
Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next week, our speaker will be our own Dave Lewis, who speaks with us often. In fact, he's leading our, he'll be the main speaker at our annual fall retreat, which is coming up at the end of September 30th through October 2nd. You'll find flyers for that out on the table out there. Yeah, that'll be great. The theme is Spiritual Friends on the Eightfold Path. So registration is open. You can either pick up a flyer here with the form on it if you're interested. The same is on our website.
And if you have any questions, I'm the registrar, so.
That's right. And then a month from now, Gary Ost will be speaking. And Gary, you mentioned a couple things today. Do you want to give us any insight or preview on what you will be talking about?
Well, I'm going to talk about rage. Did you know that that's the first word of Homer's Iliad? Rage. Sing the rage of Achilles. And about how that led the whole nation. That his rage, his unnoticed rage, his dealt with rage, caused the downfall of 4 cities. Anyway, I want to talk about how the gentle practice of Tonglen in Tibetan Buddhism has helped me come to grips with my rage.
Right on.
Wonderful. Yeah, that'll be August 21st. Let's see. Oh, Dana is the Pali word for giving, and that is what sustains us. It's what allows us to, for over 25 years, we've been running, and we've been renting this beautiful space on Sundays, and we put out our newsletter, over half of which go to prisoners, mostly gay people trying to follow the Buddha's path while incarcerated, which is very difficult. And we do a number of other things, have a dinner once a month for homeless gay youth in a tenderloin and other things. So please be generous. Our Donna Bowl is out there. Suggested donation is $8 to $10, but whatever you can give is most welcome. And our host today is Jerry.
Yes, I'm your host today. There's hot water for tea. When you're finished with your cup, just put it in the sink and I'll take care of it. There's refreshments. And I'll be bringing around the Donna Bowl. There is a sign-up list if you'd like to be on the mailing list. And at 12:30, some people gather at the front door to go to lunch. So if you're interested in that.
Other announcements? Yes.
I'm the coordinator of hosts, and we could use some help on our team. We try to schedule hosts one schedule every one Sunday every 2 months, and so to be able to accomplish that, we could use another couple of people as regular hosts. It's not a hellhole of commitment. It's basically just seeing that that there's hot water and that there are treats available to circulate with the downfall. So, if anybody is willing to try it out, speak to me during the session.
Anything else? Jerry, did you mention the sign-up sheet?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. We also have a Facebook page and a Yahoo group. And then, if you're interested in other stories of gay men following the Dharma, we have 2 volumes of Queer Dharma. Those are on the table out there. If they run out, they're free, by the way. If those run out, just see me. We have more in stock. So feel free to grab one or both of those on your way out. And during our social period, please say hi to someone you don't know or have not spoken to in a while. Let's gather in a circle for our dedication.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.